Dearly and Vain Valentino. Dearly and the Departed, Book 2. Written by L.A.K. Narrated by Zachary Zaba. Mortician Keir Dearly runs the family business, Dearly and Son. Him being said son. He's the third generation and son to run the family business that he never envisioned himself being a part of. Keir also has a secret he plans to take to the grave. If he were to tell anyone he speaks with the dead who come through his funeral home, who would believe him? Keeping the secret also prevents Keir from pursuing a love life, because how would a lover react to such news? Mechanic Dashiell Clegg owns Clegg Cycles, the family business his father left to him, and his estranged brother, Daniel. Dash has only seen Daniel twice since being released from prison, and that's perfectly fine with both of them. The brothers stay out of each other's lives, but one day, Dash gets a call that changes everything. "This is Detective Ramon Torres with the Sacramento Police Department. I'm afraid I have some bad news, sir. Your brother, Daniel, was found dead in his office at Lancer Investments this morning." And Dash is at the top of their suspect list in the blink of an eye. "Do you want to confess to killing your brother, Mr. Clegg? A shot to the heart is often considered a crime of passion." Meanwhile, a new guest shows up on Keir's table. "I'm Daniel Clegg, and my body will be here later today. I embezzled more money than you'll ever make in this dump in a lifetime. Legs figured it out, the fucking cunt, and I think she told someone. That's how I ended up on the way to your fine establishment. My younger brother is going to end up being framed for my murder. I need you to keep my brother from going to jail for a crime he didn't commit." "I'm a mortician, not a detective," Keir replies. Everything changes when Dash Clegg shows up to make his brother's funeral arrangements. The man appeared to be absolutely miserable, and Keir couldn't take his eyes off him. Dash is a damn fine specimen of a man with a shoulder-length blonde hair, blonde beard that could use a trim, and those stunning hazel eyes. After briefly getting to know him, Keir decides to help clear Dash's name, even if it's against his better judgment to do anything for Daniel Clegg. Thankfully, Keir gets a helping hand he doesn't expect and makes some new friends in the process. Scotty, the mysterious mountain of a man he hires when his best friend Barry is unable to help him around the funeral home anymore. "I'm not bothered by being around dead bodies, and I can bench 450 without breaking a sweat." Amelie, who turns out to be a psychic. Maybe.
"Mr. Dearly, I presume? I realize my appointment won't be scheduled until tomorrow. I'm Amelie Holt. I'm your new assistant."
And Detective Torres's partner, Jay Frick, who is attracted to Keir and makes no secret of it from the beginning.
"You think my ass is gorgeous, Detective?"
Frick chuckled. "That's something we can discuss over dinner tonight, if you're interested." But when death is involved, things aren't that simple to figure out. "I also took your advice and talked to Laurie Hitchcock. You got a minute?" Frick asked Dash. "Funny you should ask. I'm at Danny's office building to meet with her and Mr. Lancer as we speak. I'm actually in the men's room right now," I answered, chuckling a little. "I thought there was an odd echo. You want to call me back when—" Suddenly, there was a loud bang like a car backfiring. "Hang on," I insisted, as I opened the door and hurried down the hallway to find J.J. Lancer on the floor with a pooling puddle of blood around his head, where there was a distinct hole in his forehead. I put my phone to my ear. "You better get over here. I think I'm about to be accused of another murder." When it's revealed who the real killer was all along, and the case is closed, it takes everyone by surprise. But now Keir and Dash have a big question in front of them. Where do they go from here? It doesn't help that Dash is also unaware of the fact that Keir can speak to the dead. Speaking of which, that doesn't come without consequences, apparently.
"Be careful talking to the dead, Mr. Dearly. Your father says there's a balance that should never be disturbed." Prologue. Keir Dearly, December 31st, 2022.
You busy? I'm in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by.
Dash asked when I answered my cell phone. It was 8 on New Year's Eve morning. We'd made a date to go out for dinner later that night and then go to a club in Lavender Heights, and I was excited. The fact he wanted to come by early had my motor revving like a fine Lamborghini. Yes, of course. Mom taught me how to fry eggs when she was here last week, so I'll make us breakfast. I offered, my voice giddy. Dash sighed.
I already ate, but coffee would be great.
When we hung up, I felt a little uneasy. Dash had spent a few nights at my place after Christmas, and when he left on the 27th, I thought things were solid. Had I missed a signal that things weren't as great as I'd hoped? My stomach was rolling like tumultuous waves attacking the shore during a hurricane, so no way was I going to put food in it. I made coffee and chewed antacids like candy to calm myself. I dressed in jeans and the navy sweater Dash had bought me for Christmas, and I paced. The telltale sound of Dash's motorcycle in the driveway had me rushing to the window. He was wearing the new helmet I'd gifted him with. It had the highest safety rating on Consumer Reports, so I ordered it when I found it and gave it to him for Christmas. He seemed to like it, so I didn't think he was disappointed. Had he decided I gave shitty presents? Maybe it was a shitty gift, now that I was thinking about it. His boots were slow on the stairs, as if he were dreading seeing me, which could have been my imagination. After a couple of calming breaths, I went to the door and opened it. Come in. Dash took off his boots and jacket, putting the leather coat over the arm of the couch and his boots on the tray by the door before he followed me to the galley-style kitchen. Coffee? I asked.
Sure. How are you?
He asked. I could see the stall tactic a mile away. Look, just tell me whatever's going on, I demanded. Rip off the fucking Band-Aid, for hell's sake.
I'm afraid I have to cancel our date. I'm leaving tonight for Italy. I ordered a passport right after seeing Danny's lawyer, and it was in my mailbox when I got home after spending time with you over Christmas. I'm going to do something my pop always wanted to do. I'm going to the Ducati factory in some place called Borgo Panigale, near Bologna, to tour the factory and meet with some designers. We're going to do a bike tour of Italy, too. I'll be gone for about a month. Quinn is going to take over the shop while I'm away.
Dash announced. I could see the excitement on his face as he spoke of his upcoming adventure, and knowing everything the man had been through, I couldn't let him see how disappointed I was. It was unfair of me to begrudge him something he wanted to try just because I would miss him. Oh, how fantastic. That's going to be a lot of fun. I've never been to Italy, but I'm sure you'll have a great time. I rambled nonstop. I had to remind myself that he'd had a rough life, and he deserved to do something so great. I wanted to be happy for him, but I wasn't exactly a selfless person. What direction our relationship was headed with him being gone for a month? I could not imagine.
Chapter 1. Keir Dearly, January 10th, 2023. Dearly and son, I answered, drying my eyes with my index finger and thumb. It had been 11 days since Dash had left me, and I was still upset. I had been feeling sorry for myself since Dash had broken our date on New Year's Eve and flown off to Italy, but my time for self-pity had been going on for too long, and I just needed to get over it. I'd been busy working since the beginning of the year, but nothing had taken my mind off the heartache over missing the man I was falling for. Mr. Dearly, it's Jonas Schiff at the coroner's office. I'm calling on behalf of Dr. Ario. A friend of his mother's from work had her grandson killed last night in a drive-by shooting in East El Paso. Dr. A wondered if you could do the funeral. The family doesn't have much. I cut Jonas off. Tell Joaquim I'm happy to do it for free. Who will make the arrangements? The boy's mother. We'll forward your information to her. When can I drop him off? Jonas asked. I'll get Scott to come pick him up, Jonas. I'm honored that Joaquim thought of me. I'll do it right, I answered. Sure, Mr. Dearly. Name is Derek Langston, Jr., 17, GSW, wow, 5 of them, to the upper torso. Mother's name is Monique. I'll send the rest of the details by email. Thanks a lot. Jonas replied before we hung up. I took a deep breath, put all the bullshit behind me, and went to take a shower. As I shampooed my shorn locks, I let the tears go one more time,
prepared to wash that man right out of my hair. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't my fault. We were victims of the whims of the universe. Dash got a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to go to Italy right on the heels of my revelation that I could talk to the dead. After my confession to Dash just before Christmas, things had seemed fine. He'd hung around with Mom and me on Christmas Day when I met Lenny Burrows. The man had been damn nice to us, and we'd had the "I care a lot about your mother" discussion, which tracked with what my deceased father had told me about Lenny's intentions. They'd left a couple of days after Christmas and were headed to Catalina for New Year's. I was sure a proposal was in the offing, but I hoped it wasn't yet. She'd just talked with Dad. I hoped Lenny gave her a little more time before he popped the question. Dash had seemed to grow leery of being alone with me after Mom and Lenny had left on the 27th. That evening, he'd went back to Sacramento, which wasn't the plan we'd discussed. Since then, he'd been slow to respond to texts or return my calls. And then, on New Year's Eve morning, he'd come by the funeral home to tell me he was leaving town, breaking our date for that night. The universe was having a good old time kicking my ass. After I got out of the shower, I felt chilled to the bone. I pulled on silk-long underwear before I covered them with scrubs, noticing I'd been wearing the extra layer a lot more since Dad had inhabited my body on Christmas Eve to give his blessing to my mother regarding Lenny. I worried that maybe the furnace wasn't operating at full capacity, so I made a mental note to call a service technician to come look at it. I changed the filters as recommended, but I knew nothing about HVAC systems, so I wouldn't have the slightest idea what to look for to determine how to fix it. I headed downstairs to greet my next guest, reaching for the lights on my way down and flipping all the switches. Nothing happened. Was the whole damn place falling down around me? Fucking hell, I complained. It was a gloomy, rainy day, and it was dark inside, so I grabbed a flashlight from the storage closet by the stairway to the mortuary and turned it on before I traversed the steps, flipping switches all around the embalming room. Again, nothing happened. Just then, the door between the embalming room and the receiving bay opened, and Scott strolled in looking like a god in leather. "What are you doing here?" I asked him, surprised to see him in a long leather trench coat, pants, and gloves, no shirt, biker boots, and his blonde hair flowing over his shoulders.
"We have a problem. Touch nothing,"
he ordered before he pulled open the door to the walk-in and went inside. Of course, I walked over to the door and reached to pull it open, getting a shock that sent my ass across the floor and into a gurney. I heard a roar from inside the damn walk-in, and then the lights all came on in the building. I sat up and watched as Scott came out of the walk-in, smoke rolling off his clothes. He hurried over to me and pulled me up from the floor without effort, brushing me off for a second.
"You okay, boss?"
"What the fuck?" I gasped as I stared into his eyes, shocked to see his brown eyes were black and there was no white around the iris showing at all.
"Things are changing, Keir. I gotta go pick up our next guest. I'll be back."
With that, Scott rushed out, leaving me stunned and alone. Again, I had to say, what the fuck? That afternoon, I called an electrician to come and look at the wiring in the house, saving the furnace call for another day. After Scott had gone into the walk-in and there had been a loud roar, everything went back to normal, but I wasn't sure if one thing had anything to do with the other. From the corner of my eye, I saw a young man about 17 standing in the front foyer of Dearly & Son while I was waiting for the technician from George King Electrical to come check that the house wasn't going to burn down around me. Following my gut, I said, "Hi, are you Derek? I'm Keir Dearly. You're not exactly here yet." I hated when the young ones came in. They believed they'd live forever, and it became my responsibility to tell them that they wouldn't. Just then, I heard the receiving bay bell ring to signal Scott had returned with young Derek's body. The sound of the hearse backing into the mortuary confirmed it. If you'd like to follow me?" I headed toward the stairs to the mortuary and hurried down, glad the lights were on. I went out the stainless door to the dock to see Scott hop out of the hearse, his hair braided as usual in a faux hawk down his back and a t-shirt and jeans where his leathers had been earlier. Derek, you might want to wait inside. I suggested when I saw the young man standing alone. I could see the fear on his face, and I wanted to cry for him. But it was my job to be strong for the family, most of all, for the deceased. A male spirit entered the loading dock through the garage door. He looked a lot like Derek, though older. "Hi," I greeted.
DJ, son, I'm here.
The man greeted. The boy turned and ran to the man, who engulfed him in a hug. The man whispered to him, but all the young guy could do was nod and wipe at his eyes. Without a word to me, they were gone in a blink of an eye. I hoped the man's visit made it easier for the boy, having someone there to meet him. "How was it?" I asked Scott when he stepped to the back of the hearse and opened the door. I walked over to the gurney wrangler we had outside to assist in the transport of our guests into the mortuary. Scott laughed.
We picked up a hitchhiker on the way back from the morgue.
He lined up the table, and together we pulled out the black plastic bag. There, sitting next to where young Derek had been placed, was a young man of about 21, maybe. He appeared to be lost and pretty skittish. "Hi there," I greeted as Scott pushed the table up the ramp and through the stainless door. The young man stayed put. "I'm Keir. Are you supposed to be here?" I asked the spirit. The young man climbed out and stood to the side of the hearse, taking in the receiving bay before he straightened his clothes and turned to me. "Are you confused?" Yeah, it was obvious he was, but I wasn't sure what to do with him. I'd never had a spirit just wander into the hearse and show up without some sort of warning. "This isn't designs by Nikki, is it?" the young man asked as he walked up the stairs and towards the door. No, this is Dearly and Son Funeral Home," I answered. I scanned the young man to see he was well dressed. He was wearing a stylish suit the color of a pink carnation with a flowered shirt under it. His hair was spiked, as I'd seen young people wear it on television, and his face was like that of a porcelain doll. He was beautiful, down to his very pointy pink boots. "Leave it to Hanson to pull such a stupid joke as to get me a ride in a limo like a hearse. I'm going to need some hot tea with lemon and an aspirin. My head is killing me," the young man stated. I turned to Scott and raised an eyebrow. "Any ideas?" He shook his head at me as my phone chimed and the front bell rang. It was turning out to be quite a day.
Chapter 2. Dashiell Clegg, January 15th, 2023. The salty air of the Gulf of Naples brushed over my face like Keir's graceful fingers did when we were together in bed. He'd have loved standing on the deck of the stark white center cockpit cutter, the spirit of the sea, as we glided over the water from Naples to Capri. I'd been staying with Ivan Hofer and his wife Reggie, a fashion designer for a Paris fashion house, in their homes in Bologna, Rome, and Naples, and now we were heading to their vacation home on Capri. Ivan was the design team lead for Ducati motorcycles, and he, along with 3 other guys on his team, had been showing me around Italy for 3 solid weeks. The rest of the team had left us in Naples to head back to Bologna, but Reggie, Ivan, and I would be enjoying their vacation home for a long weekend before sailing back to Naples for my return to the States on Wednesday. I'd had a blast for 3 solid weeks, but I kept wishing I'd invited Keir to come along with me. Keir might not have been as excited about the bike stuff as I'd been while touring the Ducati plant, but the scenery in that part of Italy was breathtaking. In the evening, when I was sitting on the veranda of Ivan's home in Bologna, watching the lights come on in the city, I wished Keir's hand was in mine. Of course, he couldn't have come along for such a long trip, because who would take care of Dearly and Son? And when we were biking from Bologna to Rome to Naples, how would he have traveled? I knew Keir hated bikes. He and his mother, Lucy, had both mentioned it more than once. Hell, he'd even given me a new helmet for Christmas, which was the most uncomfortable thing in the world to wear. After I'd torn off the paper, I noticed the box it came in bragged it was the safest on the market, according to Consumer Reports. I couldn't help wondering how it would feel to have him behind me, holding on to me while seeing the incredible sights I'd seen. That would have been a dream come true for me. After I'd toured the factory and sat down with Ivan's team for 3 solid days, they'd put me through their DRE Road Academy to assess my skills level. Once I'd proven I knew how to handle a bike, I got to test drive a lot of the different models they produced on their test track. my favorite being the latest Panigale. It was as much of a rush as I'd ever felt in my life. Reggie, a tall, slender woman who could have walked a runway or two herself, made her way along the port side of the boat, holding onto the coach roof as she made her way to where I was standing, gripping the metal cable rail at the front. Bow. Learning sailing terms had been a lot harder than I'd imagined it would be.
Dashiell, would you like wine or maybe a beer? We should be there in about 40 minutes.
Reggie yelled, her French accent making some things a little difficult to understand at first, but I was catching on. No thanks, I'm good, I shouted back. My stomach wasn't sea-friendly, but I didn't want to admit it. I'd been fighting the desire to puke for about 45 minutes. The idea of a boat cruise on San Francisco Bay was something I might want to try someday. Sailing the Gulf of Naples in a boat like the one I was standing on was a bit of a different animal.
Ivan said it's going to be a bit choppy as we get closer to Capri. Do you want to come into the cockpit?
Reggie's voice was louder as she stopped halfway between the cockpit and me. Feeling the waves crashing against the hull was a little unnerving, so I decided maybe going inside was a good idea. As I made my way back to where she was standing, I suddenly lost my footing because of splashed water on the deck. I scrambled and braced myself against the cockpit roof and started for the stern when the boat listed the other way, and I was flying through the air without the life jacket I'd fought not to wear. My head connected with something on the way over the railing, and it hurt like a motherfucker. Then, darkness. I opened my eyes to see what I guessed was fog. I couldn't make out my hand in front of my face, but I felt something solid beneath my feet, so I struggled to figure out where I was. Dashiell. I wasn't swimming. I was walking, then running, yet I couldn't find the end or the beginning of where I was headed. I'm here. Suddenly, my hands touched something solid, and the fog seemed to thin. When I glanced up, I saw I was touching the very solid chest of my father, standing in front of me with a grin on his weathered face. Pop? Yeah, son. I'm here. I hugged him, assuming it was a weird dream brought on by the meds I was probably being given for hitting my head. Had I gone into the water? Shit. Had I drowned? If I was seeing my dead father, it must have been more than just a bump on the head. Where's here? I asked, my bearings shot to shit. Well, that's not quite black and white. I have a little story to tell you. Pop started as he led me through the ever-thinning fog to a beach where we took a seat at a picnic table. This isn't one of your weird stories about why I shouldn't do something like smoke pot, so I don't end up a burnout like some of your friends, is it? I rolled my eyes at him, just as I'd done when I was a kid. This ought to be good. Death doesn't make you smarter, Pop said. I chuckled and cracked a joke. So, you've run into Daniel on the other side? Then I swallowed, readying myself to ask a question I dreaded having answered. Am I dead? Wouldn't that be fucking ironic? I just find the guy I love and want to make a life with, and I get killed on a goddamn boat. The idea I was in love should have had me running like the wind, but I found myself comfortable with the idea of it. Of course, if I were dead, that would complicate things, though Keir had said he could see and talk to the dead. To be honest, Keir's admission that night had scared the hell out of me and pushed me to take the trip I hadn't been sure about, in hopes of giving myself time to figure out how I felt about his revelation. Leaving, instead of trusting him and having a rational discussion about him saying he could see and talk to the dead, had been my biggest mistake. Yeah, well, that's not what I meant. Our Norse history is complicated. Oh, I had to stop him. Are you going to give me a lecture on Odin and Thor and Loki? If I were dreaming about my father, I damn well wasn't about to go through the Marvel Comics family tree. Look, Pop, I think I fell and hit my head, and now I'm having a stupid dream, probably because I'm concussed. Fine. Big picture. Destiny. Your destiny is manifesting right now. You know your mother, my wild Irish rose, had second sight, right? Well, we were all born for a reason, and one thing's for certain is that we all die. You gotta give me that, Pop stated. For the sake of argument, second sight. What the hell is that? Your soulmate is going to be the new gatekeeper of the portal where those from the other side cross into the human world to create chaos. Since the former gatekeeper left the human world, the white spirits have tried to contain it on their own, but they're losing the power to continue. As of right now, Keir is unaware he's the new gatekeeper. Part of your job will be to help him find his way. Hell, at that point, he was speaking another language. Your Keir is inexperienced, but he's there to maintain order. Unfortunately, the dark spirits see the thinning of the veil between the human world and the afterlife as their chance to escape and wreak havoc. Your destiny is to protect your soulmate and help him keep the human world from being overtaken by an all-out breach. Order will be destroyed if these spirits escape. My father explained. What the hell are you going on about? I asked, wishing to hell I'd wake up. If I didn't know better, I'd believe I had taken shrooms or something. It had been a crazy hallucination. Your boyfriend, Keir, he can see and talk to spirits of the dead, right? Ah, that was what this was all about. My mind was trying to reconcile the bullshit about Keir believing he could see ghosts, and that he talked to my brother. God, I must have really cracked my head. How is it going? I turned to see a man who looked familiar to me. My pop laughed. He's a Viking. He's got a hard head, and it takes a while for these things to sink in. The man with him turned to me. Hello? Can I call you Dash? I shrugged. You look familiar. Who are you? The man smiled, and I was struck by a lightning bolt. Figuratively, I hoped. You're Mr. Dearly. The light in his blue eyes and the big grin, coupled with his calm manner, reminded me so much of Keir it wasn't funny. Maybe I did ingest some kind of hallucinogenic. I'd eaten some mushroom ravioli earlier for lunch before we left Naples. Perhaps some of them weren't food grade or more medicinal. I am. Please, call me Dave. I'm pleased to meet the man meant for my son. Yeah, how do you know that? I sort of thought that soulmates meant that you were a soul that split apart and were later reunited. Wouldn't that mean we'd be the same age? I couldn't help but ask. Like I said, being dead doesn't make you smart. Dave here is going to explain to you about the funeral home and that portal to hell that's opened in the mortuary walk-in. Pop explained. Mr. Dearly chuckled. Well, it's not quite. It's a little more complicated than that. I can't seem to wake up, so I guess I've got time, I replied. Mr. Dearly took a seat at the table with us. Our family's history goes back to 11th century France. One of our relatives, a Benedictine monk, impregnated a young girl from a village outside of Normandy. And an eternity later, and I thought Keir had been spared, but I can see now that he wasn't. There is a storm brewing behind the veil that separates the afterlife from the human world. Forces of evil are fighting to be released in an unsuspecting world, and some of the old-timers seem to think now's the time, and Dearly and Son is the place. Mr. Dearly explained. I was beginning to wonder if I were dead because I'd listened, though it seemed to take him forever to tell the story. Damn, my imagination was working overtime on this shit.